It's all around us every day. It affects our mood, our livelihood, our very survival. Yet we can't change it. We can hardly even predict it. We feel we've come a long way in understanding and controlling our planet until we think about the weather. The average temperature, winds and rainfall that a place experiences over a period of years make up its climate. The weather is what happens on a particular day, and this doesn't always fit in with the overall climatic pattern. In some places, one weather day is much like another. In the tropics, where there's not much seasonal variation, you can often set your watch by the afternoon rain shower. But in temperate regions, weather is far more variable. In a single weather day, we could see everything: frost and fog, blue skies and winds, hail, snow, and thunderstorms. When things are this unpredictable, it helps to know which way the wind's blowing. Weather vanes have been doing the rounds since 48 BC. In the 9th century, Pope Nicholas I decreed that all church weather vanes should feature a cockerel to remind worshippers how St. Peter denied Christ 3 times before the dawn. Weather vanes have taken some strange turns since then. Dawn, and with it, the first clues to the new weather day. It's the sun that drives our weather from the poles to the tropics. But what if one morning the sun didn't rise? An Aztec myth tells that when the gods created our world, it was dark and cold. The youngest of the gods sacrificed himself to create a sun, but it was like him, weak and feeble. Only when powerful gods offered themselves did the sun blaze into life. But it needed constant fuel, human lives. The Aztecs obliged. They offered tens of thousands of human sacrifices a year, just to make sure the sun rose each morning. But a sunny morning isn't always a warm one. Cloud keeps the earth warm after dark. Without this blanket, temperatures can plummet overnight. Water vapor in the air turns into millions of ice crystals and freezes onto every surface. So we may wake up to a visit from Jack Frost out of a clear blue sky. Global warming means freak freezes are less widespread now than in the past. Only 200 years ago, there were ice fairs in England on the frozen River Thames. It's often chilly at Niagara Falls, but 20 years ago, it stopped in its tracks, frozen solid. Frosts are still capricious. You can even chill out in the tropics, once in a blue moon. The morning sun takes time to break the ice. Its rays are low and slanting. As it rises in the sky, the rays become more powerful, and that power hasn't gone unnoticed. Virtually every society, from the Japanese to the ancient Egyptians, had some history of sun worship. In Hindu belief, the sun was the god Vishnu striding across the sky in 3 huge leaps: sunrise, midday, and sunset. But the power of the sun can be a mixed blessing. Fortunately, our planet is swaddled in layers of gases which make up the atmosphere, and they filter out many of the sun's most harmful rays. The layer nearest to us is the troposphere, and this is where the weather action is. The troposphere is about 8 miles thick. It's the air we breathe, and it's never still. As the sun's rays reach down, they heat up this layer of air and make it move and swirl like soup in a cauldron. The troposphere is alive with movement, whipped up each day by the passage of the sun, the energy powerhouse which fuels our planet. It's this complex interaction of sun and gases which gives us our weather and makes it so changeable over much of the world. We've never been able to escape the weather, and its very uncertainty intrigues us. Just as we've always tried to predict the future, we've always tried to forecast the weather. We used to think it was all in the lap of the gods. The ancient Greeks believed that the weather was controlled by a pantheon of gods who amused themselves by hurling thunderbolts and unchaining the winds. On a whim, Jupiter would unleash the seas and rivers. The earth, its people, and its weather were the gods' playthings. Gods or no gods, the Greek philosopher Aristotle was certain that careful observation could reveal patterns in the weather. He invented meteorology, and ever since we've been pitting our wits against the weather. Our most important weapon is still the one suggested by Aristotle. Observing what's around us is the basis of all forecasting. Fortunately, nature provides plenty of weather signs for the sharp-eyed. Some plants, such as the morning glory, open up only when it's fine and dry, while pine cones only open when it's damp. Animals seem to know more about weather forecasting than we do. Old wives' tales tell us that cows may lie down if there's rain coming, and birds fall silent before thunderstorms. Old wives certainly knew their onions. It's a widespread belief that if onions grow thick skins or several layers of brown ones, there's a hard winter coming. As the weather day wears on, the air begins to stir. Wind is simply air rushing from one place to another. It's being pushed and pulled by the sun-driven activity in the troposphere. Air moves from areas where it's cold and huddled under its own weight, areas of high pressure, to warmer areas where it can rise and spread out, areas of low pressure. It was Evangelista Torricelli, a pupil of Galileo, who first showed that air has weight and invented a barometer to measure its pressure. 17th century Italians were dedicated to discovering the weather's secrets. Their instruments were the forerunners of our modern meteorological equipment. Wind can be a gentle breeze sweetly plucking an Aeolian harp. Or it can literally bowl you over. Was the Greek god of the wind. He gave the hero Odysseus a present of the stormy winds, safely secured in a tiny leather bag. But his crew, overcome with curiosity, undid the bag and outleapt the storm winds, battering their ship wildly off course. It's easy to believe that the ancient weather gods are still testing their strength. The Tacoma Bridge proved no match for the unharnessed winds. It only managed to hang on for 4 months. Wind may not be empty-handed. In the 1930s, black blizzards in the American Dust Bowl blew topsoil from one state into another, until the next storm blew it all back again. And there's a Japanese wind so destructive that we know it better as the word for a suicide warrior, the kamikaze. Wind has curious effects on humans. American studies show that playground fights double when the wind rises to force 6 or more. And heart attacks and strokes occur more frequently as the wind rises. There are winds which seem to blow no one any good. The Santa Ana in California is a hot, dry wind which raises temperatures dramatically, and the figures for murder and suicide rise with them. Murderers have even claimed its effects in their defense. Local winds can be vital. Large parts of Asia depend on the seasonal monsoon to bring rain to land, which otherwise would be arid all year. But it's when winds get into a spin that their full power is unleashed. Tornadoes are formed when strong winds stream past the top of a rising column of warm air, whipping it into a spiral. The winds on the outside can reach 300 miles per hour. Like a giant vacuum cleaner, the tornado lifts anything in its path. It's the touchdown which causes most of the problems. There's a huge fallout of debris traveling at more than 100 miles an hour. But occasionally, a tornado can exercise real delicacy, like lifting up a dresser full of china and setting it down again without breaking a single thing. They've even been known to pluck a chicken's feathers. Tornadoes, along with other weather catastrophes, are still known as acts of God. We recognize that weather is outside our control, but we still want advance information. In World War II, accurate forecasting of a lull in a June storm helped ensure the success of the D-Day invasion. Weather forecasts were regarded as secret weapons, classified information, but even this didn't stop the British from talking about the weather. Nowadays, the clamor for forecasts is unceasing. Day after day, we scan the media for the weather forecast, but it may not tell us much. Short-term forecasts are usually reliable, especially in places with fairly stable weather patterns. Accuracy is greatest for a period 12 hours ahead, and quite good up to 48 hours. But more than a week or two in advance, and it's anybody's guess. It isn't for want of trying. 24 hours a day, our most sophisticated efforts and enormous resources go into this quest. But long-range forecasting still eludes us. By noon in our weather day, the sun's rays are at their most powerful. But at least we can try to keep a cool head. Although normally only mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. Some of the hottest places on Earth are also the driest. Parts of the South American Atacama Desert haven't seen a drop of rain for over 400 years. Rain is essential, the key to all life. Scratch the surface of any culture and you'll find rainmakers. In 1893, there was a drought in Sicily. Prayers and offerings were made. Every possible saint petitioned. After 6 dry months, the villagers turned angrily on their saints and evicted them unceremoniously. It rained. During the early years of the 20th century, the American Charles H. Hatfield made a good living as a rainmaker. But no one has ever discovered the secret of his success. By the 1960s, the Chinese had moved away from traditional gods, but threatened with a major drought in 1963, they turned back to the rain god Tao Hui. The drought broke, and Tao Hui began to enjoy quite a revival. We've tried to apply technology to rainmaking by dropping particles of silver iodide or frozen carbon dioxide into the clouds. It works up to a point, and only, of course, if the clouds are there to start with. There's no new water on our planet. What we have goes round and round in a cycle. Evaporation from lakes and seas returns as rain, which finds its way into the river and back to the oceans to start all over again. But of course there's a downside to rain. We can get too much. Consistently wet places can cope. Mount Waialeale in Hawaii only averages 11 dry days a year, so they're used to it. But sudden torrential rain anywhere else causes havoc. In the Bangladesh floods of 1988, 3/4 of the country was affected, hundreds drowned, and over 5 million people were left homeless. Floods cost more lives than any other weather catastrophe. There's always water in the air, even in deserts. It's held as water vapor in an invisible reservoir. Warm air can hold much more water vapor than cold. That's why arriving in the tropics can feel like stepping into a steam room. But we can't see this airborne moisture until the air cools enough for the vapor to condense into droplets, like fog. Rain-starved regions rely on this daily dose of moisture. In Chile, people literally net their drinking water. A fog net can deliver 13,000 gallons a day. Water vapor needs something to condense onto, and tiny particles in the air are perfect. Where there's lots of pollution, there's lots of fog, and it can be as dense as it's dirty. Before London cleaned up its act, people came up with some unusual ways to guarantee a breath of fresh air. In the afternoon of the weather day, after the sun has heated the earth, the condensation process starts to produce cumulus clouds. Warm air rises, taking its water vapor with it. But as it cools, the moisture forms tiny droplets, clouds. In early Scandinavian cultures, the clouds were the home of the mythical Valkyries, who rode white cloud horses whose shining manes scattered frost and dew. The Valkyries gathered up the slain Viking warriors and took them to Valhalla, the hero's paradise. We're so used to clouds that we rarely pause to consider their variety, or simply their beauty. We even make our own clouds. Contrails are water vapor from airplane exhausts, condensing in trails behind them. Big clouds hold millions of tons of water, but each droplet is tiny. It would take 7 billion just to fill a tablespoon. Eventually, enough of them will join together to make a drop heavy enough to fall. If the cloud is very high, ice crystals form instead of raindrops, and eventually make it down to the ground as snow. Gently falling snowflakes are one thing, but howling blizzards are another. Visibility drops to almost zero, and the wind-driven snow piles up in deep drifts. Pathfinding St. Bernard dogs are the traditional answer in the European Alps. though their welcome may be owed more to what they carry around their necks. They needed more than St. Bernards in Colorado in 1921, when 76 inches of snow fell in one day. But a freeze is always fun for someone. Being hit by giant hailstones is never fun, however. The largest hailstone ever recorded weighed as much as a good-sized paperweight. Monster hailstones are not that unusual. They pulverize crops and do more than $300 million worth of damage every year. They can even kill. 200 people died in a hailstorm in western Hunan province, China in 1932. We've tried to prevent hail showers. At the beginning of the 20th century, huge guns were fired into the clouds to prevent hailstones from forming. It didn't work. In 1902, 11 people were killed by the falling shot. Stormy weather is often due to weather patterns known as depressions. These are born out of the clash between warm, damp air over the tropics and dry, cold air from the poles. They just don't mix. As they collide, the warm air rises over the cold. Cold air chases warm, creating vast banks of turbulent air. The edges of the air masses are known as fronts. Winter storms can be particularly severe at sea. James I of England suspected a diabolical plot when he was almost shipwrecked in heavy seas. At a trial in Scotland, an accused witch, Agnes Sampson, confessed to creating a storm to kill the king. She was burned at the stake on Castle Hill, Edinburgh in 1592. Violently active clouds over the world's largest oceans can generate a deadly spiral dance. As the storms move over warm, open water, more clouds form and the spiral quickens. Soon a howling, whirling mass of energy is heading towards land. A hurricane is on the way. The destructive force of hurricanes combines 200-mile-an-hour winds with torrential rain. A hurricane picks up 2 billion tons of water in a single day, and when it hits land, it just lets go. But this monster of weather power provides us with a forecasting success story. We can track their course and forecast when they'll arrive on land. By late afternoon, the sky reflects the intense activity of the weather day. We may see rainbows, refractions of the sun's rays through water droplets in the air. In Norse mythology, the rainbow was a bridge between the earth and the gods. Made from air, water, and fire, this ethereal link was rarely visible to humans. The sunset edges the weather day towards its close. The sun's slanting rays pierce the atmospheric soup of gases, dust, ice crystals, and water, and split into rich, magical colors. At the end of the day, after the sun has stirred the air, the peace may be shattered by the weather day's crowning spectacular. The thunderstorm. Particles, rain droplets, and ice crystals gyrate and collide high in the clouds, building up enough energy to light up a small town for a year. Positively charged particles gather at the top of the cloud and negative ones at the bottom. The energy is discharged as light, heat, and sound. Native American myths tell of the firebird, a great spirit whose wings crack out thunder. Lightning is the flash in the thunderbird's eye. A bolt of lightning carries about 1,000,000 volts and is 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. A thunderstorm can release as much energy as an atomic bomb, most of it harmlessly into the atmosphere. Looking from space, it's not hard to believe that 100 people a year are killed by lightning in the USA alone. 8 to 9 million lightning strikes hit the Earth each day. And don't believe that lightning never strikes twice. Roy Sutherland, a ranger in Yosemite National Park, survived being struck 7 times between 1942 and 1977. The Romans felt that their best protection was to wear bay leaves. Why the gods favored bay is lost in time, but the Romans believed it would persuade Jupiter to hurl his thunderbolts elsewhere. Medieval Europeans thought that ringing a bell dispersed thunderstorms. Unfortunately, the bell ringers were often struck themselves. Lightning seeks the most direct route to the Earth, usually through tall trees and church steeples. Weather is the greatest natural force we know, for good or ill. If we're lucky, we survive the worst of it and enjoy its benefits. Rain to grow our food, sunshine to warm us, a breeze to cool us. Even violent storms are not all bad. In fact, they may have been the most important thing ever to happen to our planet. It is thought that millions of years ago, it was the electrical activity of thunderclouds which sparked the Earth into life.
Eyewitness Museum. Created by combining traditional filmmaking techniques with state-of-the-art graphics. Stripping away the mysteries of nature and science to reveal the essence of each subject. Bringing the world into sharp focus. The making of Eyewitness. The distinct style of the Eyewitness books is the basis for each of the programs. Each half-hour episode is based on a book title. The Eyewitness book's visual style gives the program makers a starting point and a challenge. The challenge of transferring clarity and super realism into moving images and sound. Now let's take a look behind the scenes at the making of Weather. In each Eyewitness program, the director creates a hero around which the action takes place. And as you might expect in Weather, the hero was a weather-vane cockerel. But for the cockerel, it was nothing to crow about, as the crew were going to put him through his paces. They say lightning never strikes twice, but in the Eyewitness studio, it can, with a little help from an arc welder. You've probably heard of casting pearl before swine, but before cockerels? Well, that's exactly what we did to create a designer hailstorm. And finally, the message here was not in a bottle, but in a can. Instant frost to give him that frosty, glistening look. We put our hero through every kind of weather condition, and he just kept coming back for more. Sometimes during filming, things don't turn out as planned. Here, the director wanted to pack a window with helium-filled balloons and blow them out so they would rise to the ceiling. Everything's set.
And action!
Well, they blew out, but not up.
Well, let's count.
Over to the graphics department, where the artist took one balloon and placed it where he wanted it. And repeated the action until he had achieved the desired effect. When filming the cow, a little touching up was required here too. Beautiful as she is, she was a little too white, even for the Eyewitness Museum. After a wash and blow dry, it was time to apply a little makeup. And the effect was complete.